Have you ever found yourself reacting to a spilled cup of coffee or maybe a slightly delayed text message in a way that feels wildly, embarrassingly out of proportion? Welcome to Mindset Matters Book Club YouTube channel. Please subscribe and like to hear new book summaries. Today, we're finding out why your brain does that.
Yeah, it's a completely universal feeling, but, it's one we rarely understand biologically. We usually expect our ailments to be visible, like engineering.
Right, like you break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points to it and says, there it is, there's the problem.
Exactly. It's binary, broken or not broken, it's clean, and frankly, it's comforting. We really like things to be categorized like that.
We do, but when you step into the world of neurodevelopment and childhood adaptation, that x-ray machine is completely useless, right?
Oh, totally useless. We're looking at a diagnostic landscape that is entirely murky. Because the injury isn't in the bone.
Right, it's in the nervous system.
Exactly, it's in the nervous system.
Yeah.
And the origins of that injury are, well, they're almost entirely invisible to us by the time we actually reach adulthood.
Which is basically the mission of our deep dive today. We are exploring the book Reparenting the Inner Child by Dr. Nicole LePera.
Such a fantastic book.
It really is. And our goal here is to uncover how our earliest unspoken memories completely dictate our adult behaviors. Like, we're going to figure out how to effectively reparent ourselves, to break free from these invisible scripts.
Because those scripts keep us feeling stuck or anxious or completely disconnected.
Right. I am incredibly excited for us to take this journey into self-discovery with you today.
And I'm really looking forward to connecting the dots for the listener.
Yeah.
We have to bridge that massive gap between early childhood environments and adult neurobiology.
Because once you understand the actual, literal, mechanical why behind your physical reactions to stress, you can actually begin to dismantle them, right?
Absolutely. So let's unpack this concept. We hear the term inner child thrown around on social media a lot.
Oh, all the time.
And honestly, it can sound a little abstract. Sometimes it's treated like a metaphor for just, being playful or eating ice cream for dinner.
Right, like, oh, I'm healing my inner child by buying Legos.
Yeah, exactly. But the book grounds this concept immediately. It shows us what an unhealed inner child actually looks like in practice.
And it does so by using Dr. LePera's own life as the prime example, which is so vulnerable and helpful.
It is. She starts by painting a very vivid picture of her childhood baseline. She basically describes herself as a kid with this intense, just unstoppable physical energy.
Yeah, she had a curved staircase in her childhood home, right?
Mm-hmm. And she would stand on a high step, grab the upper railing, and just swing her body weight like a monkey.
Wow.
Yeah, and then she'd launch herself through the air onto a beanbag chair over and over again. Her family always joked that she was quite literally bouncing off the walls.
Which, on the surface, that sounds like just a highly spirited, athletic kid.
Right. But here's where the adaptation starts to really take root. Her parents didn't know what to do with that sheer volume of energy.
So their solution was to keep her constantly, relentlessly busy.
Exactly. Her mom used to joke that if there were 8 days in a week, Nicole would have been scheduled for competitive activities on all 8 of them.
Like dance, art, every sport imaginable, just nonstop.
And we have to look at what is happening to a developing brain in that environment. Like, what was she implicitly learning through that grueling schedule?
Well, she was consistently praised for how easily things came to her in these structured, competitive environments, right?
Yes. So, neurologically, she began equating her inherent human worth with her performance.
Oh, wow.
And conversely, she learned that if she had to put in effort, like if she struggled at something, it was evidence of a core inadequacy.
So struggle literally equaled failure in her developing mind.
Exactly. That is an incredibly heavy blueprint to hand a child whose nervous system is still forming.
It really is. And that daytime energy, that constant frantic motion, it had a deeply dark side in the book.
Yeah, at night, when the schedule stopped and the house was quiet, that same restless drive mutated into severe anxiety.
She would lie in bed, literally paralyzed, terrified that her mother would fall asleep and just never wake up.
Right. And to understand why a child's brain goes to such a catastrophic place, we have to look at the broader environment.
Because the trauma isn't always something done to you, right? Sometimes it's literally just the air you breathe.
Exactly. LePera was the youngest in her family by a wide margin. Her sister was 15 years older and had severe medical issues.
Yeah, issues that required major life-threatening surgeries. The book mentions a specific trip to Cincinnati for a massive surgery when Dr. LePera was only 3 years old.
The family was staying at the Ronald McDonald House. Now, a 3-year-old does not possess the cognitive ability or the vocabulary to understand the specifics of a complex medical diagnosis.
Of course not.
But a 3-year-old is an absolute sponge for emotional energy. They are essentially highly tuned antennas.
So they pick up on everything.
Everything. The adults around her were terrified, preoccupied, and living in an ongoing state of fight or flight.
So the unspoken tension of that crisis, the hushed whispers, the strained faces, the abrupt changes in routine, that became the emotional water she was swimming in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that explains the really heartbreaking anecdotes she shares in the book later on.
Oh, right. There's one from when she was 4 years old at a half-day preschool. Her mom was her absolute anchor and usually arrived early to pick her up.
But one day, her mom was late. Maybe it was 10 minutes, maybe 30.
But Dr. LePera says her immediate thought wasn't a logical one, like, oh, mom's stuck in traffic.
No, her immediate thought, her absolute certainty was, my mother has died.
Which is just, it's devastating for a 4-year-old to go there.
She went straight to finality. And notice her reaction.
Yeah.
She didn't cry. She didn't run to the teacher for comfort.
Right, she just sat there, frozen, heart racing.
She was actively envisioning her mother's death and calculating what would happen to her now that she was an orphan. That is a textbook freeze response in the nervous system.
And this programming didn't just magically disappear as she got older. Like, fast forward to when she's 14.
Right, the ski trip.
Yes. The family takes a ski trip to the Poconos. Her parents drop her off to ski while they go check in to the hotel, and they agree to meet at the main lodge at 4 p.m.
So she shows up, waits maybe 5 minutes past the hour, and they aren't there. Instantly, that exact same panic takes over.
She starts frantically running through the ski resort looking for a payphone.
She couldn't enjoy the snow. She couldn't enjoy the independence of being 14. She was entirely consumed by the absolute biological certainty that her family had died in a car crash.
On the way to the lodge, and when her parents finally show up, just reasonably normally late because it's a ski resort and things take time, they completely brush it off.
Yeah, they say, "What were you so worried about? You're fine."
But she wasn't fine. And this is a crucial biological point we need to break down for you listening.
Right. A nervous system that has been conditioned in a constant state of crisis loses the ability to scale its response.
It literally cannot differentiate between a minor inconvenience and a true life-threatening emergency.
Exactly. To her parents, running 5 minutes late to a lodge for, realizing they were short a can of tomato paste for dinner, it sparked the same chaotic energy in their household as a hospital visit.
So her developing body learned that absolutely everything is a potential catastrophe.
Yes. The hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, the HPA axis, which controls our stress response, basically gets stuck in the on position.
Okay, here is how I think about this, because the biology can get a little dense. It's exactly like a faulty smoke detector in your house.
I love this analogy.
Right, because a healthy, well-regulated smoke detector knows the difference between a slightly burnt piece of toast popping out of the toaster and a raging 5-alarm inferno in the living room.
Exactly, it stays quiet for the toast.
But a traumatized nervous system, it's a smoke detector that is completely broken. It just screams at maximum volume, like 120 decibels, whether it's a little wisp of smoke from the toaster or the whole house burning down.
Because the alarm feels exactly the same. That is a brilliant analogy.
Thank you. Because when that alarm goes off, you don't just psychologically remember the fear of the past.
You biologically relive it in the present. The body is flooded with the exact same cortisol and adrenaline.
The heart races, the digestion stops, the pupils dilate.
And beneath it all, as she grew into an overachieving adult living in New York City, jumping from relationship to outrun her anxiety, that terrified, hypervigilant inner child was still completely running the show.
So she's physically safe at the ski lodge, but her body thinks she's in a life or death crisis. What is actually happening in the brain to cause such a massive misfire?
How do these childhood fears physically cement themselves? Well, it starts with our brain waves during early neurodevelopment.
Right. From birth to around age 7, children do not process information the way adults do.
They exist predominantly in a theta brainwave state.
Which the book notes is a lower frequency, very similar to hypnosis, right?
Precisely. Theta waves are much slower. In an adult, you might experience theta right before you fall asleep, or in deep meditation.
But for a child under 7, it is literally their default operating state.
Because their prefrontal cortex, the logical, analytical part of the brain, isn't fully developed. They lack a critical conscious filter.
So they are highly receptive and deeply impressionable. They aren't just absorbing explicit rules like, don't touch the hot stove.
Right. They are absorbing unspoken somatic cues.
Like the hushed whispers at the Ronald McDonald House.
Exactly. They are tracking the microtension in their parents' jaws, the pitch and tone of their voices, the quality of their gaze.
Wow. Like, is the caregiver's eye contact warm or is it vacant?
The child's nervous system is taking notes, internalizing exactly what is required to belong to this family and what is required to stay safe.
And this naturally brings us to attachment theory. The book briefly touches on John Bowlby's work, which feels totally foundational here.
It absolutely is.
Let's really make sense of this for the listener. Bowlby observed that the emotional availability of our caregivers shapes our internal working model of the entire world, right?
Yes, and we generally categorize this into 4 styles. Let's look at the baseline first. Secure attachment.
Okay, secure attachment.
This develops when caregivers are consistently warm, responsive, and attuned. If the child cries, the parent soothes them.
So the child learns that their needs matter, and they can safely explore the world knowing they have a safe haven to return to.
Exactly. That's the ideal.
Okay, but if that consistency isn't there, the blueprint gets warped. You get anxious attachment.
Right. Let's say the care is completely inconsistent. Sometimes the parent is incredibly loving, but other times they are cold, distracted, or overwhelmed.
So the child never knows which version of the parent they're going to get.
So the child adapts through hypervigilance. They become clingy because they have to constantly monitor the parent's mood to ensure their survival.
Wow. And in adulthood, this looks like the person who completely spirals if their partner takes 2 hours to text back, convinced they're being abandoned.
Yes. Then there is avoidant attachment. This happens if a caregiver is consistently dismissive or emotionally unavailable.
Like if the child cries and is told to stop being a baby or is just ignored.
Right. The child learns a very painful lesson. Expressing needs leads to rejection.
So the biological adaptation is to suppress the need for connection entirely.
They become overly self-reliant. In adulthood, this is the partner who shuts down and physically leaves the room the moment an argument gets emotional.
Because intimacy literally feels threatening to their nervous system.
Exactly. And finally, disorganized attachment. This is the most complex one, occurring when the caregiver is actually a source of fear or abuse.
It creates a biological paradox, doesn't it?
It does. The child has an innate drive to approach the caregiver for comfort, but their survival instinct tells them to flee from the caregiver for safety.
It's like having one foot on the gas and one foot on the brakes simultaneously.
Which leads to highly chaotic push-pull adult relationships.
So Bowlby gives us the attachment framework. But then the book takes this a step further by introducing schema therapy created by Jeffrey Young.
Yes.
And I have to admit, I initially read this and thought, wait, isn't this just a rebranding of cognitive behavioral therapy? Like, CBT is all about changing your thoughts.
It's a very common question.
Is there a functional difference in how schema therapy treats the nervous system?
There is a huge difference. CBT is fantastic, but it is often very present-focused. It targets conscious cognitive distortions like, I shouldn't think my boss hates me just because she didn't say good morning.
Right. Very logical.
Schema therapy, however, goes much deeper into the neurological grooves formed during that childhood theta state. Young worked with clients facing complex, treatment-resistant trauma.
Oh, interesting.
He realized that when those core attachment needs aren't met, we form these deep, pervasive themes or patterns. He calls them schemas.
Okay, schemas.
It's not just a passing negative thought. It's the fundamental lens through which you view reality. For example, an abandonment schema means you are fundamentally, biologically wired to anticipate that everyone you love will eventually leave you.
Let's make this concrete. The book shares this incredible illustrative case study about Dr. LePera's client, Aisha.
Ah, yes. Aisha's story is so common.
Aisha came to her because she had a devastating pattern in her romantic life. She repeatedly gave absolutely everything to her boyfriends.
She would put her own life, her hobbies, and her career on hold to support them, and she got absolutely nothing in return.
It was so bad that her boyfriends wouldn't even take her out to celebrate when she got a job promotion.
And if you just use basic behavioral therapy, you might tell Aisha, you need to set better boundaries.
Right, just say no.
But that wouldn't work because it ignores the schema. When Dr. LePera dug into Aisha's childhood, they found the root.
Aisha had a very close relationship with her father, but the dynamic was completely inverted, right?
Yes. Her father was emotionally volatile, and Aisha, as a little girl, had to act as his emotional caretaker. She had to manage his moods to keep the household safe.
What's fascinating here is that Aisha's adult behavior, sacrificing herself for men who gave nothing back, wasn't a random character flaw.
No, not at all.
It wasn't that she just had bad taste in men. It was a direct continuation of her childhood survival strategy.
Exactly. She learned in that receptive theta state that love meant caretaking. If she wasn't fixing a man, she didn't feel loved.
This is why we say the inner child isn't just a cute metaphor. It represents literal, physical neural pathways formed by early adaptations.
In neuroscience, there's a saying, neurons that fire together wire together.
Right. So each time little Aisha suppressed her own needs to calm her father, a thought, an emotion, and an action linked together.
And the nervous system reinforced that specific route as the only way to survive. The body remembers what the conscious mind has forgotten.
So for you listening to this right now, I really want you to think about your own default reactions to stress.
Yeah, pay attention to that.
When the pressure is on at work, or when there's conflict in your home, what happens to your body? Do you immediately overfunction and try to fix everything for everyone?
Do you shut down, go numb, and withdraw?
Do you start frantically people-pleasing to smooth over the tension? That reaction isn't a choice you're making in the moment. That is your theta state programming playing out in real time.
And understanding that transition from the psychological narrative to the actual physiological response is critical.
Because the book emphasizes that the toll of this hidden programming isn't just emotional. It's not just that you feel sad.
No, this hidden programming alters our actual biology, our cellular health, and even our cultural inheritance.
Yes, let's dive into that. Stress is not just in your head. It is profoundly physiological.
Chronic stress literally reshapes the nervous system over decades. The book mentions it can narrow your capacity for joy, impact your immune system, and significantly alter your gut microbiome.
Which we now know is deeply tied to serotonin production and emotional balance, right?
Yes, absolutely. And if you look at the historical context of psychology, it's actually staggering how long it took the medical community to realize this connection.
Right. You look at the giants of psychology, like B.F. Skinner focused almost entirely on behavior and rewards operant conditioning. Give a rat a pellet, it presses the lever.
Then you have Jean Piaget, who was brilliant, but he focused almost exclusively on cognitive development and how a child learns to solve puzzles.
And Erik Erikson mapped out the psychosocial stages of identity. But why did all these brilliant models miss the mark on trauma?
Because they were observing outward behavior or conscious thought. They lacked the modern neuroimaging, like fMRIs, to see the somatic markers.
So they missed a crucial element.
Yeah.
The physical body. They completely missed how the tissues and the nervous system hold on to trauma.
Exactly. And because our society is built on those older models, a lot of us end up what the book calls addicted to stress without even knowing it.
This blew my mind. If your baseline was formed in a chaotic environment like Dr. LePera, always waiting for the other shoe to drop with her sister's health, your nervous system thinks chaos is normal.
The scientific term for this is allostasis, how the body maintains stability through change.
Okay, allostasis.
If you constantly flood the body with cortisol, the body sets a new, higher baseline for what normal feels like.
Which means you might rate a severe, toxic level of stress as merely moderate.
Right. You might thrive on drama or take on impossible deadlines at work because true physiological calm actually feels dangerous and understimulating to your brain. You've never known it.
This is where the power of our internal narrative, our belief system, and how it translates into hard biology becomes undeniable.
The book highlights some truly astonishing clinical data to prove that our thoughts directly, physically impact our cellular state.
Okay, I have to talk about the 2002 fake surgery study. This was incredible.
Oh, this study's mind-blowing.
Patients with severe osteoarthritis of the knee were divided into groups. Some got real invasive arthroscopic surgeries to clear out the joint.
And some got a sham procedure.
Yeah.
A fake surgery where they just made a small incision and sewed it back up. They did absolutely nothing to the knee itself.
And remarkably, when they tracked these patients, all three groups reported the exact same reduced pain and improved mobility.
It sounds like magic, but it's biology. The mere belief that they had been healed triggered the brain to release endogenous opioids, the body's natural painkillers.
Wow. Their expectation literally altered the descending pain pathways in their spinal cord.
The belief created a physical result indistinguishable from actual surgery.
Then there's the aging mindset study. Researchers followed 660 adults over the age of 50.
And they found that those who viewed aging positively, who believed it was a time of wisdom, growth, and contribution, lived an average of 7.5 years longer than those who viewed it negatively as a time of decline.
And again, the mechanism here is fascinating. People with positive views on aging have been shown to have lower systemic inflammation, reduced cortisol output, and even longer telomeres.
Which are the protective caps on the ends of our DNA strands. Their beliefs influence their immune function at a cellular level.
And the depression placebo study. Patients who were given a placebo pill for major depressive disorder, a sugar pill with 0 active ingredients, showed actual, measurable, increased activation in their prefrontal cortex.
That's the area of the brain associated with emotional regulation.
The brain changed its own chemistry simply because the patient expected to feel better.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? I have to push back here for a second. Are we saying positive thinking and good vibes can cure physical illnesses?
I am so glad you pushed back on that.
Because that sounds like toxic positivity. It sounds a little, well, woo-woo. Like we're blaming people for being sick because they didn't think happy enough thoughts.
It is a vital distinction to make. The book and the science clarifies that beliefs absolutely do not replace necessary medical care. Positive thinking is not a substitute for an oncologist or a surgeon.
Right. No one is saying you can good vibe a broken arm back together.
Exactly. But beliefs are a vital complement to healing. Why? Because beliefs dictate which branch of the autonomic nervous system is driving the car.
Explain that for me.
If you deeply believe, I am powerless, I am broken, and nothing will ever get better, your brain perceives a threat.
Right.
It pumps out stress hormones, adrenaline, and cortisol, activating the sympathetic nervous system. This leads to chronic inflammation, muscle tension, and a suppressed immune system. Your body is directing all its resources toward fighting a tiger, not healing a cell.
But if you shift that narrative to, I have agency, I am safe, and I am capable of healing, your nervous system calms down.
The parasympathetic nervous system engages, the stress hormones drop, your heart rate variability improves.
You are creating the optimal physical, biological environment for healing to actually occur.
Okay, that makes total sense. It's not magic. It's just removing the biological roadblock of chronic stress.
So having established how biology, early environment, and our inner narratives interact, we need to help the listener map out exactly what their own hidden injuries look like.
The book compares emotional wounds to physical scars. If you break a bone, you can see it on that X-ray.
But emotional wounds are invisible. But as we've learned, they are wired into the brain just as permanently until they are consciously addressed.
Dr. LePera maps out several core emotional wounds, tracing them directly back to specific parenting dynamics and childhood environments. Let's walk through a few of the major ones.
And I encourage you listening to see if you recognize yourself in any of these. Let's start with the abandonment wound.
This one is usually caused by disconnected, physically absent, or emotionally unpredictable parents.
The child learns early on that connection is fragile and could be ripped away at any moment.
So what does this look like in an adult? It looks like intense guardedness, chronic suspicion, or even emotional self-sabotage.
If you're running this script, you might subconsciously pick fights or push people away before they have the chance to leave you. You reject them first to control the pain.
Then we have the scarcity wound. This often stems from uninvolved or neglectful parents, where the child's basic emotional or even material needs were consistently ignored.
The internalized neurological belief becomes, there is never enough and there isn't enough of me to matter.
In an adult, this translates into severe overfunctioning. They live with a constant sense of urgency. They feel immense guilt when receiving care or gifts.
Because they deeply believe there is simply no space in the world for them to exist and be supported.
Exactly. Next is the injustice wound. This one is fascinating.
It usually comes from authoritarian parents' environments with incredibly rigid rules but very little emotional attunement.
Obedience was valued above all else.
Yeah.
Love was conditional on being good.
And the adult result of that environment is moral rigidity, extreme black and white thinking.
The adult uses being right as a shield to stay safe and in control. They often create vast emotional distance from others because gray areas, nuance, and making mistakes feel completely biologically intolerable.
If they are wrong, their nervous system tells them they are fundamentally unsafe.
And finally, the rejection wound. This often originates from highly critical or status-oriented parents.
The child was praised for their performance, their grades, their athletic trophies, but their genuine, messy, emotional expression was rejected or shamed.
The core belief becomes, my real, authentic self is not acceptable.
This creates an adult who intensely people pleases, they pursue perfectionism relentlessly, and they entirely hide their true authenticity.
They become a chameleon, constantly scanning the room to figure out who they need to be accepted.
The book uses this wonderful, poignant analogy of the ugly duckling story to explain this. We spend our entire lives trying to shrink, edit, or hide parts of ourselves because we have been conditioned by these wounds to think we're just broken, clumsy, inadequate ducks.
Right? We bend over backwards, twisting our personalities, trying to belong to the duck family, completely failing to realize that we are actually swans.
We aren't broken, we're just in the wrong pond, playing by the wrong rules.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it aligns beautifully with a psychological framework called internal family systems, or IFS, developed by Richard Schwartz, which the book heavily references.
Right. IFS posits that our psyche is not just one single monolithic personality. We are made up of different parts.
Like you might have a part of you that carries deep childhood shame, but then you have a manager part that acts as a protector by numbing you out.
Maybe that's the part that mindlessly scrolls on a phone for 4 hours or drinks too much wine.
And you might have a firefighter part that protects you by relentlessly achieving at work so no one can ever criticize you.
Exactly. It's not multiple personality disorder. It's compartmentalization as a survival mechanism.
And when people first recognize these parts, especially the destructive ones, their first instinct is to go to war with them. They want to cut off the lazy part or forcefully destroy the anxious part.
But Schwartz and LePera argue that healing isn't amputation. These parts are adaptations.
They are neurological strategies that form to keep you safe when you are small and vulnerable.
Healing is about listening to them, understanding their original protective intent, offering them the validation they never got, and welcoming them home.
So as you are listening to this, I really challenge you to pause and ask yourself, which of these wounds resonates the most with you?
When you look at your adult relationships, your stress responses, your career choices, are you running the abandonment script, the scarcity script? Are you hiding your swan self because of a deep rejection wound?
Identifying the specific wound is the absolutely necessary precursor to treating it.
Which logically brings us to the core actionable solution of the entire book. We've mapped out the genesis of the trauma, the hard neuroscience of the theta state, and the specific emotional wounds.
So how do we actually practically fix this?
We do it through reparenting. Let's define it clearly because it can sound like self-indulgence, but it's not.
Reparenting is the deliberate, conscious practice of giving yourself the nurturance, the boundaries, and the care that you did not receive growing up.
It's about your conscious adult self finally stepping in as a capable caregiver for that overwhelmed, reactive inner child.
And the absolute key to reparenting, the thing that makes it actually work, is that it does not start with massive, life-altering overhauls.
You don't heal your nervous system by suddenly moving to a cabin in the woods or meditating for 3 hours a day. It starts at the microscopic level.
It starts with the habit loop.
Yes, start incredibly small. The book suggests things that seem almost trivial, drinking exactly 64 ounces of water a day, or committing to stretching your body for exactly 1 minute.
No more, no less. And the trick to making it stick is to connect it to an existing habit you already do on autopilot, like brushing your teeth.
Brush your teeth, then immediately stretch for 1 minute.
The profound mechanism at work here is neuroplasticity. The goal isn't actually fitness or hydration. The goal is to prove to your traumatized nervous system that you will consistently show up for yourself.
You are making small, daily, undeniable declarations that say, I matter, I am safe, I make a promise to myself, and I keep it.
You are literally laying down new neural pathways of safety and self-trust, brick by microscopic brick.
Once that baseline of trust is established, Dr. LePera maps out this reparenting journey onto what she calls the individual development model, which is made up of 5 specific spheres.
Safety and security, individuation, agency and empathy, authenticity, and transcendence.
We need to explore these, but I want to focus heavily on the sphere of authenticity because this completely shifted my perspective.
It is arguably the most challenging sphere to master.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Authenticity isn't just a modern buzzword about living your best life or wearing quirky clothes.
To be authentic means showing up unmasked and unfiltered. It means aligning your internal reality with your external expression.
And when we suppress our truth, our body physically, biologically bears the cost. The book cites a fascinating study from a field called kinesiology, which studies muscular responses.
Researchers have observed that muscles literally objectively weaken when a person speaks a falsehood, and they strengthen when a person speaks a truth.
Now, to ground this in hard science for our listeners, let's explain why that happens. It sounds like a parlor trick, but it's the autonomic nervous system at work.
When you speak a lie, or when you abandon your true feelings to keep the peace, you create cognitive dissonance. This requires a higher cognitive load.
Your brain basically has to work harder to maintain the fabrication.
This microscopic stress activates the sympathetic nervous system, a tiny fight-or-flight response. That subtle spike in stress hormones causes a disruption in motor control and microtension in the muscles, resulting in immeasurable physical weakness.
Let that sink in. The body does not lie. When you abandon yourself, when you force a smile through deep resentment, when you say yes to a project when every fiber of your being means no.
When you minimize your own needs just to keep your partner comfortable.
Your body registers that self-betrayal as physical trauma. You are carrying the weight of what your conscious mind is trying to deny.
So radical honesty isn't just a moral virtue. It is a biological requirement to heal.
It's having the courage to say, this is who I am and this is what I need, even when your inner child is screaming that setting a boundary is unsafe because of your childhood programming.
And to support that terrifying level of radical honesty, we have to provide ourselves with robust nurturance.
The book highlights the work of renowned trauma therapist Peter Levine, who outlines 4 essential types of nurturance we must actively integrate into our reparenting practice to soothe the nervous system.
Let's break those down, starting with physical nurturance. This is about attuning to the animal body.
It means getting adequate rest, eating actual nourishing food, and engaging in joyful movement.
It is not about punishing your body on a treadmill to burn calories. It's about moving in a way that feels inherently good and safe.
Second is emotional nurturance. This is huge. This is offering yourself tenderness, empathy, and most importantly, giving yourself explicit permission to actually feel your feelings without immediately trying to shut them down, judge them, or fix them.
If you are sad, you just allow the sadness to exist. Third is verbal nurturance.
This is about deliberately changing that harsh, critical internal dialogue. If you drop a glass, do you call yourself stupid, or do you say, it's okay, it's just a glass?
It's speaking to yourself with encouragement. It also includes the power of reading, journaling, and storytelling to reframe your narrative.
And finally, spiritual nurturance. And the book clarifies this isn't necessarily religious.
Right. It's about creative expression. It's about experiencing awe in nature or finding a connection to a community or a purpose greater than yourself.
Integrating these 4 types of nurturance teaches the nervous system that care is finally undeniably safe to receive.
But look, we have to address the reality of this process. Reparenting sounds amazing in theory. You drink your 64 ounces of water, you speak your radical truth, you nurture your body.
But what happens when the pain still hurts? What happens when you've done months of the work, you've read all the books, and you still get massively triggered by a text message?
Yes, we have to move into the final stage of the journey here. Moving past what I call toxic positivity into true, gritty, grounded resilience.
The book illustrates this trap perfectly with the story of a woman named Mira. Mira had finally done the brave thing and left a highly emotionally abusive marriage.
And afterward, she did everything the modern Instagram self-help world told her was right.
She meditated every morning. She meticulously journaled. She posted glowing, positive affirmations online. She hired a life coach who told her she needed to raise her vibration and absolutely refused to dwell on the past.
So she smiled through the devastating sadness. She forgave her ex-husband way too soon just to prove she was evolved.
And she completely avoided talking about the terrifying panic attacks that were still waking her up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat.
Her shoulders were chronically tight, her breath was shallow, and she thought to herself, I'm doing all the exercises. I must not be healing right. I'm broken.
What Mira didn't realize was that she had simply traded one form of self-abandonment for another. She went from abandoning herself to placate her abuser to abandoning herself for spiritual perfectionism.
She was using wellness tools to dissociate from her body's actual reality.
Her true healing only began when a wise friend sat her down and asked her a profound, paradigm-shifting question. What would it feel like to stop trying to fix yourself?
Wow, that question broke something open for her. She realized she had to stop forcing meaning onto her trauma and start actually physically feeling the pain of it. She needed radical acceptance.
Radical acceptance is a cornerstone of deep psychological healing. It is the ability to acknowledge reality exactly as it is, without judgment, without trying to silverline it, even when it is incredibly painful.
Healing is not erasing the past. It's not achieving a permanent state of Zen-like bliss where nothing ever bothers you again. That is a myth.
Her mantra shifted. It wasn't let it go anymore because she couldn't let it go. Her mantra became, I can hold the terrible thing that happened to me and I can still choose to love myself today.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, specifically to the neuroscience of post-traumatic growth, this act of radical acceptance and meaning-making is crucial.
When we honor the complexity of our pain and actively choose to make meaning out of it, we activate a specific network in the brain called the default mode network, or the DMN.
Okay, let's break down the default mode network for the listener. How does that actually work?
The DMN is a large-scale brain network connecting the medial prefrontal cortex with the posterior cingulate cortex.
It is the system heavily involved in self-reflection, autobiographical memory, and identity integration.
When trauma occurs, it is often stored in the amygdala as fragmented, unintegrated sensory data. A smell, a sound, a feeling of panic. It's not stored as a logical story.
When you practice radical acceptance and begin to make meaning, you push that fragmented data up into the DMN.
The DMN acts like a master librarian. It takes those chaotic, terrifying memories and weaves them into a coherent, empowered narrative of who you are.
When you can say, this terrible thing happened to me and it hurt, but this is the strength I developed because of it, you are literally connecting neural dots. You are biologically building resilience.
That is incredibly empowering. So how can you, the listener, actively engage your default mode network and do this? The book offers a few incredibly powerful, actionable practices to foster this integration.
The first practice is writing a letter to the self who endured.
You sit down and think back to the specific version of you that was walking through the fire, maybe that 14-year-old completely panicked at the ski lodge, or you in your 20s stuck in a toxic job or relationship.
And you write a letter to them. But you don't speak with the judgment of hindsight. You speak with profound love.
You acknowledge that they were surviving on pure instinct, without a map, doing the absolute best they could.
And you let them know that you, the adult, are here now. And they don't have to carry the weight alone anymore.
I love that so much. The second practice is creating a timeline of growth. You draw a literal horizontal line on a piece of paper.
You mark 4 to 6 key events, major losses, relationship ruptures, deep challenges. Beneath each event, you write down exactly what was lost. Be honest.
Maybe you lost safety or innocence or financial security or trust, but then above each event on the timeline, you write what was gained, even if it took you 10 years to realize it.
Maybe you gained an ironclad boundary, a profound truth about your own resilience, or deep empathy for others.
And then you retitle the overarching story of your life based on those hard-won gains, not just the losses.
And finally, the practice that underpins everything. The daily check-in. This is the unglamorous, vital maintenance work of reparenting.
You find a quiet space for just 2 minutes. You place one hand on your heart and one hand on your belly, which physically grounds the nervous system.
You take a slow, deep breath, and you simply ask your body, what do I need most today?
And you listen. You don't judge the answer. If the answer is, I need to rest, you figure out how to offer yourself rest.
You essentially whisper to yourself, I am listening. I am here. I am finally becoming who I was always meant to be.
It's about returning to yourself over and over and over again with the exact presence, attunement, and consistency that your inner child was always desperately searching for.
We have covered so much vital ground today. We started by acknowledging that restless, panicking inner child that lives inside so many of us, treating every minor delay like a life or death crisis.
We looked at the hard, undeniable neuroscience of how attachment styles in early environments, that hyperreceptive theta state, physically wire our brains and our biology for chronic stress.
We mapped out those deep, invisible emotional wounds, abandonment, scarcity, injustice, and rejection that secretly dictate our adult relationships.
And finally, we committed to the granular daily work of reparenting, proving to our nervous systems through microscopic habits, radical honesty, and radical acceptance that we are finally safe.
And if you take nothing else away, remember this. You do not have to do it all at once. Healing isn't a race to a finish line. It's a slow, gentle return to your authentic self.
Exactly. I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on, something to carry with you long after this deep dive ends. We talked about how, for so many of us, our traumatized, terrified inner child has been frantically driving the car of our life for decades.
They've been white-knuckling the steering wheel, peering over the dashboard, swerving erratically out of a desperate need to keep us safe from the fires they see everywhere.
But what happens the exact moment that inner child finally looks over and realizes that you, the capable, regulated, wise adult, have a valid license and can actually take the wheel?
What would that inner child finally do with all their newfound free time in the back seat?
Maybe for the very first time in your entire life, they could just look out the window, relax, and play.
That is a beautiful, deeply scientifically grounded vision of what is absolutely possible on the other side of this work.
Please subscribe to the channel, and more importantly, try to apply just one of these insights to your own life today. Drink that glass of water. Place your hand on your heart. Speak one small truth. Remind yourself that you are not a broken X-ray machine. You are just learning how to build your own internal home. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time.